Hello everyone, welcome to my music theory lesson. This is lesson 12.5, Chromatic Modulation. In today's lesson we are going to learn how to write a chord progression that modulates using a chromatic modulation. Chromatic modulations work best with distant keys. A chromatic modulation contains 3 chords where the soprano moves a half step in the same direction between each chord. The first chord can be anything diatonic to the original key. The second chord must be a dominant function chord of the new key. The third chord is the 1 chord or any inversions of it in the new key. The beginning of a chromatic modulation is simply a chord progression that moves from the establishment of the original key to the first chord. The 3 chords are the G sharp minor triad, A dominant 7th chord, and D major triad. The soprano voice has G sharp, G, F sharp, moving down a half step between each of the chords. The first chord is diatonic to B major, the original key. The second chord is a dominant function chord in D major. The third chord is the 1 chord in the new key, D major. In this example, the 1 chord of the original key can smoothly move to the 6th chord, so there is no need for any extra chords in between as part of the modulation. When choosing which 3 chords to use for the modulation, start by choosing the second chord. The second chord must contain a note that is a half step away from scale degree 1, 3, or 5 in the new key. It must be a dominant function chord in the new key. Next, choose the inversion of the third chord, which must be a 1 chord, so that the second chord can properly resolve. Use root position whenever possible. Lastly, choose the first chord, which can be any chord diatonic to the original key. Make sure that it is possible for the soprano voice to move a half step in the same direction between the 3 chords. When writing the chromatic modulation, start by writing the second chord. Then resolve the second chord to the third chord. Remember that the soprano must move a half step, so if it doesn't, rearrange the chords so that the voice that moves a half step is the soprano. Next, add the first chord and voice it so that the soprano moves a half step in the same direction as it does going from the second to the third chord. Lastly, move in the original key from the last chord of the establishment, which is usually 1, to the first chord in the modulation. You need to learn how to fluently write chromatic modulations using the process we learned in this lesson, and the best way is by practicing. Let's try it on the next slide. Write a chromatic modulation from C major to B flat major. Sample answer shown. The modulation is from the first beat of the second measure to the first beat of the third measure. The modulation starts by moving to the 1 chord, which is the first of the 3 main chords in the modulation. The first chord is a C major triad, which is 1 in the original key. The second chord is an F dominant 7th chord, which is 5/7 in the new key, a dominant function chord. That chord then resolves to the 1 chord of B flat major. The soprano is E, E flat, D, moving a half step down between each of the 3 chords. Write a chromatic modulation from G minor to D major. Sample answer shown. The first chord is a 4 chord in G minor. The second chord is a 5 chord in D major, which is a dominant function chord in the new key. That resolves to the 1 chord in the new key. The soprano is C, C sharp, D, moving a half step up between each of the 3 chords. Conclusion. In this lesson, we learned that a chromatic modulation has 3 chords with the soprano moving a half step in the same direction between each of the 3 chords. We also learned the process of writing a chromatic modulation. For more practice, please download my music theory app. In the next lesson, we are going to talk about sequential and circle modulations. See you next time!